Noob School. All right, welcome back to Noob School. John Sterling here, and this is Sales Talk, the Sales Talk show that you've all been waiting for. Today, I have my sidekick, Marty Osborn, here with me. Marty, welcome.
Hey, Johnny.
Hail. Hail.
Hey.
So Marty's here. We're going to start the program talking about a book, because we normally do. Marty and I both read a lot. I think Marty might read more than I do, but we read a lot. And we try to find a book that we think that you'd all like to read. And this one's called The $1 Trillion Coach. This is a book about Bill Campbell. Bill was he would say, mediocre at best football coach, high school football coach, I believe.
Actually did middle school.
Middle school. a mediocre middle school coach. Let's call it back east or somewhere back east, I don't remember. But he ended up getting in technology business and moving out to Silicon Valley, I would say at a very fortuitous time. You know, things were kind of rolling pretty good. And he had a couple of good runs at different tech companies, including one at Apple. But what he became known for, if you read this book, you'll get to understand this a lot better, is leadership and leadership training. Going back to his football days of, leading people on the field, making them better, trying to empathize and understand where they're coming from. But kind of the way he led as a technology manager or leader, he was really big into love of all things. You would think that's not the thing you'd get in Silicon Valley, but he was big on loving each other. He was a big hugger. He liked to hug people, and he just became kind of a legend out there for being someone that everyone wanted to follow. And when his career was over, he became an executive coach in Silicon Valley, and he did so for free, right? Mm-hmm. He didn't ever charge anyone, but the people that used his services for years were people like Steve Jobs, Eric Schmidt at Google, and a host of others used his services. And he was big on things like, let's don't just go tell everyone what we're going to do. Let's make sure we have buy-in. With the very least, make sure that everyone gets a say. Everyone has the ability to say what they think about each problem or decision before the decision gets made. And I think he really helped a lot of those company grow. So we'll dig down on some of the details of the book with Marty and of course, our special guest.
We have a special guest
coming down a little bit later.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would highly recommend $1 Trillion Coach. And I just think it's amazing that somebody probably became the best executive coach in the history of the world who was also a bad middle school football coach.
Yeah, he was actually a high school coach. I laugh, but one of the stories in the book is about him coaching middle school at like a rich private school flag football team, but he took it as serious as every one of the businesses.
Yeah. Well, what was your take on the book, Marty?
Yeah, it was funny. We always like our guests to pick a book, and our guest this time chose $1 Million or $1 Trillion Coach, and I had read it years back, and so it was really refreshing to go back, look at my notes, kind of reread it, and I think it's because he has a line in it. It's about the people, stupid, right? What he taught Steve Jobs and Eric Schmidt and all those people was that it's not just being smart. Everybody's sort of smart. It's like going to Harvard, it's going to Stanford. They're all smart people. What differentiates them is the team and the people. Yeah. And so I think that's where he was able to really make his impression, is how to grow the team, how to make people feel important and special.
Right. Well, before we get any more in the book, I think you probably have an announcement to make.
Yeah.
Did something change in your life since the last sales talk?
Yeah, since the last sales talk, a little bit of a change. I have my journey with Accenture and Advoco kind of came to an end, and we I'm now kind of free to kind of explore some other avenues. So I'm out doing some different things. I've started a new company called Be Better Inc.
Yeah.
Kind of back to why the book's really important is, what Bill did was how do we make people better? And so one of my goals is, how do we be better each and every day of what we do? And so, so one of the things I want to tell you is, I think as I'm writing the book and doing my research, one of the things was people always ask that question, what's the key to success? Like Marty, John, what's that key to success? Yeah. And so I was thinking about what's the key to success. And what I think would be fun is to hear from our audience, right? If they will send in, so Marty at Be Better Inc., if you send me an email just with your one word, what do you think the key to success is? What I'm going to do is we're going to draw from those, and somebody's going to win a $100 gift card to Starbucks.
Nice.
So this show you there's something for everybody, but we would love to hear, because as I'm sort of doing the research and I'm thinking about like the book and the coaching is, what does it take to be better? Like, what does it take to be successful in sales? And I'm curious to see what people think, and I think our next show we'll talk about that.
Yeah, that's great. So if somebody wants to play, they send you an email with their suggestion for what it takes to be successful.
Correct. And then again, the one thing is there's not any right answer.
Yeah.
It's understanding what people think. I think we have an opinion on it, but we're going to pick from just for playing, for sending it in. We'll pick one and we'll announce a winner at the next show. And I'll donate a $100 gift card to Starbucks or Amazon, whatever they would like.
Yeah, well, you can afford it.
I can, just a bit.
Well, yeah, and I don't want to give away all the answers because, of course, we'll talk about that next week or the next show we do. Because I remember when I was that age, when I was the noob age, I literally went to somebody who's like my age now who was successful, and I said, "What's the secret to success?" Like he was just going to tell me.
Yeah.
Like, here it is. It's like, no, it's a lot of things.
Yeah.
Right. It's a lot of things overlapping each other to give you the best chance. But we'll let them figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing on the book I wanted to ask you about was. The superstar. He talked about the superstar, like every business has one employee or more who are like really, really good at what they do, but won't follow the rules, won't play ball, won't do whatever. And I think what he said was coach them to say, we appreciate what you do and we'll let you do it. And here's your rules. Just stay out of the way. You can't cause any turmoil, but we're not going to make you, come to the staff meeting every day. Did you get that out of that book?
I read a little bit about that. I mean, I'm not a big fan of that strategy, because to me, one of the things is when you allow people to not follow the rules, and we say that you're the superstar, I think we're allowing really bad behavior, right? And we've seen that over and over again. And, one of the things I really believe is that, if you looked at, he had a rule, I think it was, about people, like what he saw were the key traits. When he really looked at people, right, one of them was honesty and humility, right? He said that's number one. Number two was willingness, right, to persevere and work hard, right? That was the second trait. And the last one was openness to learn. And so when somebody kind of says they're the superstar and I know everything and they're not open to learn, I don't think you'll ultimately be a team player, and I think you'll struggle with that. So I think, Bill really wanted everybody. I love the part about having a seat at the table. There's a saying, you've got to weigh in to buy in. And one thing Bill was really important in the book was you've got to get people to weigh in, to tell what you think. And if you think about it, and he has that example where, and he was talking more about inclusion, right? I mean, there was a lot of new females coming into the business, yet they weren't sitting at the table, they were sitting along the wall. And he would go to these executives and say, no, you need to sit at the table. You need to be at the table. Because if you're not at the table, if you're along the wall, then you're not really part of the discussion. And so that was one of the big things was how do we, throughout our organizations, give each and every one a seat at the table, because if you're not there, then you're not weighing in, and now you're not buying in.
Yeah, I agree. And on the star syndrome, it's a tough one. And I think I agree with you in principle that you'd rather not have those people, right? You'd rather have all the people playing the same way. But an exception to that, I've had that before where I had someone who I could not get to do what I wanted, but very talented
Yeah.
at something, and we made him a contractor.
Yeah.
We just said, you're a contractor. You're not part of the team. You're a contractor, and we're only asking you to do one specific thing. And so I don't know if you call that cheating or what, but it does get them out of the company,
Yeah.
but still get their talent.
Yeah. So one other thing he said, and I thought this was interesting, is he said, and again, all people are different, right? We all know from our children, same parents,
Yeah.
same upbringing. You know your kids, I know
Yeah.
my kids are totally different. And so I do think as employees, there's not just one way. And I think sometimes as leaders, you have a superstar and we're trying to just make it one way and there's not. And he used the example that each person, as leaders, we have to be like artists. We have to understand what makes them tick, what makes them special. And so sometimes in that superstar isn't just, well, you have to do it exactly this way.
Yeah.
I think each and every one, as we know, sales teams, all of our salespeople are going to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
Some people are really grinders. Some people are more intuitive. Some people are, want to do something this way. So I don't think we have to say it's only one way.
Yeah.
I think we have to understand that. And the other great line, and I thought this, I think this what separates the great leaders from the rest is that great leaders lie awake at night trying to figure out how to make their team successful, not themselves.
Right.
And I mean, if you think about it, that's what, Bill did, is he spent a lot of time trying to figure out how do they make the team win, not the me. And so I've always wrestled with that is me versus we. And we struggle with that, right? Is what do I have to do? I got to make my numbers. I got to do,
Yeah.
I want to go to club, me. And sometimes that becomes difficult. So Bill really tried to break that in a really tough places.
Yeah, and he did.
He did.
I mean, if Steve Jobs would listen to him, that's pretty damn amazing.
Yeah, that was incredible. The other thing I thought was interesting, coming from the football side, is Tom Landry. And he had this quote in there, and it said, a coach is someone who tells you what you don't want to hear and has you see what you don't want to see so you can be who you always know you can be. And I thought that quote as a leader, one of the hardest things we do is how do we lean into people to help get them better? But, people's like our egos don't want to hear it. We want to be told what we're doing right.
Yeah.
We always want to be told what's great. And if you think about football coaches, basketball coaches, their job is to say, hey, this is where you need work.
Yeah.
And I think as leaders, and I think even as like noobs, right?
Yeah.
Understand that when your leader leans into you and says, hey, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, it's not out of a sign of arrogance or I don't like you. It's really out of a position of love, right? It's I want to help you be who you are. And sometimes we have these blind spots. And so for him to talk about that, I thought was really amazing. And like Tom Landry is, their job is how to get better is we all have those blind spots.
Yeah, and it's also so important, he mentions in the book, to create a safe environment for these discussions, that people, not only are they allowed to share their opinion, but it's safe. They're not going to get in trouble. No one's going to hold it against them or scream at them or, it's good because you really, if you are the leader of the business, you would like everyone's opinion because one of them might be okay.
Yeah.
Might be a good opinion out there. You don't want them to just clam up and just say, whatever you say, Marty.
Right.
know?
And I mean, John, I want to toot your horn, but I mean, that was one of the things when I worked for you, as I thought you were a great leader because you were always open and you loved to say, what do you think? What do you think? Right? What are your ideas? Like, how many leaders don't do that?
No, I just didn't know the answers. I was looking for some help.
Which is good, but even if you do the answers, you still, I mean, you knew the answers.
Yeah.
You had a feel, I mean, you were, I always laugh because I think I learned a lot of my reading from you because you used to always have your reading list. And since I've known you for 30 years, I love in an earlier interview, and they said, well, what makes a new friend? And you said, well, somebody who's not 25 years. You've known a lot of people, but being open and to new ideas, to hear what people think. I mean, we as leaders, right? We think we're visionaries. We're running the company, and our ego says we have to have all the answers, and we don't. Like he even goes in to say, you don't have all the answers just because you're CAO. You're good at one thing.
Yeah.
But your team, like when you build, they say hire people smarter than you. It's not that they're smarter than you. Might be still the smartest person, but you hired a head of sales because they're good at sales.
Yeah.
You hire a CTO because they're good at technology.
Yeah.
You hire a really good service person, right? So they're smart in their areas. And so he kind of talked about that team building is not just hiring smart people, but hiring people that are really good at what they do.
I agree. And, I think I've talked to you about this before, but of all the people that we've worked with, Reed Wilson has become a really good leader, and he has built a great company, sold the company. But of all the people that we've worked with, nobody called me more than Reed Wilson over the last 15 years.
Yeah.
And he would say, John, I got this thing. I'm thinking about firing this guy, and what do you think? But he didn't just call me. He probably had 5 or 6 other people he would call, and he would just get the input, look at the input, then he would decide.
Yes.
And that's something that a lot of the leaders don't understand is they don't have to do what the people say. Just get the input and make a decision.
Make a decision. And I think that's, one of, I call them sort of my be better attitudes, but one of them is courage.
Yeah.
And it's interesting and he talks about courage in the book, is courage to hear other people's opinions.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we live in a world, there's Gary Vaynerchuk. Most people hear him. I was a huge follower, kind of stopped following him, and I started listening to something, and he said, we're living not in a red or blue world, we're living in a purple world. Like there's no there's not that one answer. There's purple. It could be different things. And Reed was great. He worked for me in the West Coast. We go into a lot of stories. We have to have him as a guest.
Yes.
We do. But some funny stories with Reed. And but yeah, I think being open to what other people think, I think is one of the greatest signs of a leader. And when the leader becomes closed off and wants all the answers, I think that's when there's a problem.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break. Break, hear a word from our sponsor, Fruit of the Loom. We'll be right back. Don't forget to pick up your copy of Sales for Noobs. This book will help any young person that wants to go into sales. You can pick up my CD, Jazz at the Falls, on Spotify or Amazon. Your choice. Hope you enjoy it. All right, welcome back to Noob School. Hope you enjoyed that quick break. We have added, as you can see, Greg Jackson has joined us. Greg is a colleague and friend going back 27 years, we
25.
think. 25 years. Worked with me and Marty, and is in town visiting from Austin, where he runs a technology company, of course. And anyway, Greg's a good friend, and we asked him on the show today specifically to talk about a book. So what book influenced you the most, or what's your favorite business book? And Greg said...
I said $1 Trillion Coach.
$1 Trillion Coach.
I did.
That's right. So Marty and I had a quick little pre-discussion about this. And
Yep.
I said he was a mediocre high school coach. Marty says, no, John, he's a mediocre middle school coach. And Greg says he was a college coach. Right?
He was a mediocre college coach. But then when he still coached, once he moved, I think it was in Atherton, which is this really richy suburb out there.
Yeah.
He coached a middle school, I think girls flag football team, and they were really good. So he made them really good. But as a college perspective, it was not that
kept
great.
coaching.
So a few of the facts got great. But I did want to comment about Marty.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to?
You sure?
Well, the purple thing.
Yeah.
I was like, is that your cue? I was thinking offline, is that his cue to talk about it's not red or blue, it's purple? Or was it a Clemson thing?
I think it's the purple thing that I was really trying to say, but I didn't think about that, so I'm glad you brought that up.
Or his favorite artist is Donny Osmond.
Of course it is.
No, Ozzy Osbourne.
Oh my gosh!
But it is a good book, and I can I make one other comment?
Whatever
about that?
you want to make.
And you actually coached me on the list, and you said just make sure it's not one of those really heady, hard to read books. So I had to pick my favorite book, but there was parameters on it. But it is a good one.
Yeah.
And I like the things that you guys were talking about in terms of it, about the people and those types of things. There's a couple other things that kind of jumped out at me, and one was, I had never heard of this guy. I guess if you were in that ecosystem, you would have. But your comment about how impressive it was that he was helping all these people and the whole coachability and the people aspect of it. And then the other thing that jumped out at me was, from a leadership perspective, the whole notion of solving the hardest problem. And that's, you can get distracted oftentimes on keeping the mechanics right and this and some of the routines and those type of things, and you want your habits to be healthy so that you're driving forward. That the making sure that you're focused on solving the hardest problem and the candor to be able to have those tough dialogues is interesting.
Yeah, I think like that whole accountability, and you talked about the elephant in the room, and one of the hardest things we have as leaders is to lean in to that difficult situation, to handle that accountability. But when we do, right, because there's going to be that blowback, there's going to be that fight, and to stay in the moment, once it's out there, then you can address it and you can move on. And so, it's a great point in that piece.
I had a guy, having a difficult conversation with somebody, a coaching conversation is difficult. And it can be difficult on both sides if not done correctly. But I had this guy, Bill Lee, who's been so helpful to me over the years, and he was the best at it. I mean, he could tell me anything and make me feel okay about it. Because he would say, first of all, his body language, he'd be like, he'd be close, like he cared about me, and he'd smile and say, Greg, if you're okay, you asked me to help grow the revenue, right? This might hurt your feelings, but if you're okay with it, I'm going to tell you something that I think if you changed it, it'll help the revenue go up. Are you okay with that? Yeah. And then he would tell me, and then he would, big old smile and turn his head a little bit, and I felt okay about it. But, any other way, you kind of put your shields up. You're like, what are you talking about? I know what I'm doing. So anyway, he was very good at that.
Well, it was funny. One of the lines I kind of learned, and we were working on leaning in, or difficult conversations, and we were taught that we would sit down with somebody and say, John, is it okay if I lean into you? Right? Because one of the things that we find when we're trying to work through a behavior or a situation is we ask permission. It sounds kind of odd, but, Greg, is it okay if I lean into you, right? And people will be like, yeah, sure. And so they now know it's coming. I always said it's like when you're driving and you just turn, right? You're a passenger, you hit your head out, like, it hurts. But if I blinker, hey, I'm making a turn. And I think if you can signal
if
a person.
If you can signal it, it's true.
It's good.
I've had people do this to me before, and I use it now, too, as a technique, and it's around, this isn't going to be an easy conversation, or this is going to be a difficult conversation. And I think people appreciate that, and it actually kind of gives you the full air in the lungs to be able to do it, and then it's never easy, some of those things, but I think it's a good way to make it happen, and that's what I liked about this guy. And the other thing that he pointed out in there is, if you got to give somebody a swift kick in the ass, one is make sure you do it privately, right, and then at the same time, remind that you're doing it for a reason and a purpose.
Out of love, right?
And it comes back to the love aspect, which is, and when that happens, you get better and you do better. So,
one thing I think one of a big lesson out of the book is, and I would hope like any young person, any new leader, is the fact that here is a guy, a football coach, going in, coaching the greatest, some of the leaders, but they were open to hearing. They were open to trying to be better. And I think that's where, in sales and leadership and anything we were doing, is one of the keys is to be open to learn, to understand we have blind spots, to understand that we don't know anything or everything. And so hearing you think average Joe guy coaching these people, I think is like a really good lesson.
It is, and it's interesting because part of it is the narrative on a Jobs or these other famous leaders is that they're it's all an individual. They did everything themselves. And
Right.
the truth is, they got teams of people that are helping them. Right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily teams, but key strategic coaches
Sure.
or
Yeah.
those types of folks that are making a big difference, which
Yeah.
is pretty cool.
Well, another thing in there was just about the feedback being key to improving. Back in our early days, we would listen to the reps make calls, or we'd listen to the tapes of the calls.
Yeah.
And some of the people that I would say were good reps, you hear a tape, they'd be doing something entirely wrong every time. Like, for example, they would say something like, they would just talk, and they would say, basically, and then they'd talk, basically. They just kept saying basically, and so the guy on the other end of the phone's like, this is driving me insane, the guy won't stop saying basically. And so you got to tell him, say, listen, I know you're doing pretty good, but if you stop saying basically, you're basically going to double your number here,
Yeah.
And so, that's just pure feedback.
Yeah.
That if you don't get it, you'll be saying that your whole damn life.
That technique that you've done for years, which is awesome, by the way. Like, he actually referred to that in a way when he's asked to go and work with a team of people. And he, the important thing is he just goes in, he says he listens and observes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And when you do that, it's amazing what you see
Right.
that others don't. And to be able to, because that's got to be kind of interesting.
Yeah.
You're going into a Google senior staff meeting and you're just sitting against the back wall seeing what's going on, right?
Yeah.
Like in terms of the dynamics of the people, and then to be able to, go and help. It takes guts to ask for that,
Right.
in terms of going in there. But, that's a good technique, right?
Yeah.
You don't, it's oftentimes it's like if you think you're going to have a coach, they're going to come in and tell you everything to do. Well, the most important thing at the front end is probably to listen a little bit.
Yeah. Find out what's going on. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
I mean, blind spots is our biggest problem, right? We sort of have our own internal view, but getting that external view, like you see it over and over again. It's kind of a different example, but we were working in plants, like in the maintenance team, and we used to do these, like, we call them wrench time studies. And we would go out and observe what the worker was doing. Now, they hated it.
Yep.
Right? Hated it,
Yeah.
right? Oh, they're watching me and everything else.
Yeah.
So you think about it, we're watching them, and so they should be on best behavior, they should do everything. And it was funny because they still never could get over like 20% of their time actually on the machine. And it wasn't, what we were pointing out, it wasn't a negative, it was really the processes that we had, that you're walking all over the place, the parts cribs halfway across the room. It was like, their work orders were over here. And so just through that observation, we were able to figure out how planning, scheduling could increase productivity. It had nothing to do with the worker. They were doing everything they could
Sure.
in that observation. And I think being that coach, being on the outside, being in sales, I mean, John, that was, to actually sit down and record a phone call, that's nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
But man, you learn a lot.
They hated it. They hated it. But like you said, Greg, or Marty, they would bring a recorded call every day. And so the one I'm listening to is the best one of the day, and it still stinks. So the good news is by hearing that in those first few months of training, you can fix them quickly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So they're not, they don't do that forever. They learn.
Yeah.
And the biggest problem, Marty, on a new reps call is typically talking too much.
Yeah.
They just start getting nervous and they start talking and,
Yeah.
Oh, they think they gotta be, they think they gotta be selling. I gotta be selling, And it's like, no. Like, I always said, just reverse it. If somebody got on the phone with you and we're doing this, you would be like, click, right? But if they opened up and said, hey, just checking out, how's your day? What's going on? Look, I don't know if this is the right fit for you, right? Ask permission.
yeah.
I don't know if this might be the right fit, but, do you have a second? I can just share with you something that other people like you have used,
Yeah.
right? And people are like, oh, okay, well,
Yeah.
I'll listen to you, as opposed to
Yeah.
they just jump into their pitch.
Right.
Yeah.
Anything else on the book?
The only other observation that kind of resonated with me was you're coaching the person in the system, right? It's, if you're a leader, it's
Yeah.
both, right? And people have different roles to play at different times, and there's probably different techniques that you can use to communicate best with them, because a big introvert, how you communicate with that person is very different than a leader of sales.
Yeah.
And then, but, from a leader standpoint, you got to figure out how do these pieces fit together in the overall system, and how do you get the best out of, Marty's got a really, really, really good idea, and he's not going to tell, in a room of 6 people, he's not going to say anything. And so you got to be able to reach in and say, hey, Marty, I know you've got some thoughts on this.
Yeah.
Please share them with the team. And you got to be, conscious of how you kind of manage that approach to make sure that open communication happens, and you model it, and then over time people get better with it.
Yeah.
So.
I think it's just constantly that thought about being open. And I think back to some original stories, like, I don't even think I knew Greg at the time, and I was looking for somebody to join my sales engineering team. But I don't know if you remember.
Yeah.
And I heard about this guy, right? And he was over in Germany, and everybody sung his praises. And so I'm like looking around, like, who's Johnny Bafilios' leader? And Johnny worked for Greg at the time, and Greg's like, no, absolutely not. Like, who is this Osborn guy? And then I think you like took a day, and you're like, well, wait a minute. What's best for Johnny? And you're like,
well, I got a chance to sit down with him, and he was so nervous, right? Like, it was like I thought he was going to cry, and I just asked him the question. I was like, look, what do you feel passionate about, and what do you want to do? And he goes, I really want to go and do this. And I was like, well, that's an easy decision. Nice. The company wins in that scenario, right? Like, it was what he wanted, and if it wasn't his heart was not necessarily in the other, it was just he wanted to do that more.
Yeah.
And go and learn from Marty in terms of that technique, and it's worked out tremendously well for me.
And that was kind of, I think, our first interaction was when we first met.
But it was perfect.
But it
worked out
like,
okay.
Worked great, and we've I mean, I even laughed, like, when you left to go to Austin, and I remember you and Ralph were recruiting me to come down there, and I went down, and I really liked what you guys were doing, and obviously I love working with both our great leaders, you and Ralph, and I remember my wife says, wait a minute, let me get this straight. You're going to make me leave Greenville. You're going to travel all the time, and I won't know anybody. I don't think this is going to work. So I kind of said, you know what? I'm going to stay in Greenville. And
well, things happen for a reason.
Yeah,
right?
So.
Well, anything else?
No. Well, there was one other thing I thought was back to the football story. I thought it was interesting, too, when he said he was like, he liked to run his football team like business. And he said, when you're in business, you got to stay focused. And you got to be in the moment.
Yeah.
And his phone rang, and he turned around and he showed his team that it was Stephen Jobs, and he wasn't going to take his call. He would take it later because he is in the moment. He's there now.
Yeah.
And
It's a great lesson.
I tell you, that's the lesson that I like. And I learned a while ago, like, how do you be where your feet are?
Yeah.
Like, be in the moment with your team, because what signal do you send? You're in a meeting, you're talking, you're in with having dinner with your spouse or whatever, and your phone rings, and you answer it and you talk. What message are you sending to the people you're with? And so it's just funny, that example is he wasn't even going to take a call from Stephen Jobs. Stephen can wait.
Yeah.
I'm coaching football. So I thought that was a pretty cool story.
Very
a
good.
great story.
It's very good. Well, Greg, thanks for coming all the way from Austin and bringing this great book with you. We'll have to come back and do it again sometime.
I certainly will.
All
We
right.
have to
Do
get
a
him to
heady
move
book the
back.
next time.
By the way, you talk about Canada.
Yeah.
Holy crap. The other thing is with Canada, Greg gets me out there and he says, hey, let's go skiing.
Yeah.
Oh, that was great.
I think it was the coldest I've ever been in my
It was
life.
minus 20. We shouldn't have went.
Minus 20?
It was
Minus
probably the
20
cold-
C, yeah. Like, we shouldn't have been on the mountain. Like, we were out there for
There was no lift lines, obviously.
yeah. So you could do one run, and then it literally would take you 25 minutes to unthaw your toes. And then we do it again. But I give Marty credit. So when he pays for something, he's going to get his money's worth.
Yeah.
We spent the whole day.
Yeah. We are not leaving.
Yeah,
Greg's
we-
like, can we go home now?
Yeah,
I'm like,
I was
no,
good
the chairs
at
are still
noon.
running.
Yeah, all good.
Oh. All right, guys. Thank you. Appreciate it. See you next time.